Hafa and welcome to House to Home. I'm Liz Duenas and I'm here with Gina Campos. And over the past few shows, we've been actually focusing on permitting. And we've been interviewing different people, including the Lieutenant Governor, who has a project to help streamline our permitting process to help you, the consumer, have a better way of processing your permits. So today we have our task force chairperson, Bert Johnston, and we're gonna talk a bit about what he's doing to help in the process. Bert.
Thank you for allowing me to speak about the process. We're basically looking at the building permit and the business license processes to determine, first of all, what's happening right now, okay? And then determine how best to change it if it needs to be changed. And part of the process that we've gone through right now is to take a look at just the evidence, what's out there right now, talking to both the people that are in the building permit process and people that are trying to get building permits and business licenses processed. And it's just evidence gathering right now. But we're also taking a look at other communities. How are they handling this type of stuff? Because we can't be unique in this situation. This is happening elsewhere, and there are some other best practices out there, and we're taking a look at those also.
You know, Bert, what I get concerned about is the best practices elsewhere. I mean, I've seen where the government of Guam has looked at best practices elsewhere, or even what do other areas charge for this fee or that fee, and they're applying it to Guam. And sometimes, I mean, the concept is great, but it may not be applicable.
Absolutely,
absolutely. Yeah, I hope you guys take that into consideration
I've seen that also,
too.
Right, but I've seen that also, and I understand that if you want to solve a problem, you need to understand the problem first. Okay, and you have to sit down and take a look at what is the rationale, why are they doing these different things? Is it a legislative mandate? Is it a regulatory mandate? Is it just a discretionary mandate that they're doing? Why are they doing these things? And then asking them, if they had an opportunity to change it, how would they change it? Yeah, because some of the best ideas are there, and we've never taken the opportunity to capture that. And then on the same side, talking to the people that are going through the process and asking them very similar questions. You know, how was your experience? And if you had an opportunity to change this, how would you change it? Because both sides have gems of ideas that can improve even the best practices that are happening in the States.
Right, but some of the processes are redundant. I mean, we've interviewed some of the contractors and they would go to one agency and then have to repeat what they're doing with the second agency. And remember, they have to go to 6 or 7 agencies, and if there's redundancy for each agency, it's a waste of time.
Again, understanding what the mandates are and understanding the logic behind that. And it doesn't matter whether you're applying for a job or for a bank loan. You got a lot of redundant processes there. And so all of these different processes have to take a look at and understand, first of all, what the process is, what's the logic behind these processes, and if it's redundant, how can we reduce that redundancy? Because redundancy causes time and effort.
So right now, Bert, in your committee, what is the first step the committee has taken? I am in the process of applying for a building permit. And one of the things that you know, being in real estate, we're always promoting, Liz and I are always promoting when we come across developers, contractors, building what we consider affordable housing. And to us, affordable housing is,
nowadays,
it's a shame to say, but if it's under $325,000, to us, it's affordable housing.
Yeah, because you know it can move.
We know it can, we know there's a lot of people in the community that are looking for that price range. So, I mean, in the past, affordable housing was under $200,000. We can't even, that's not even a conversation anybody wants to have because they can't afford to build.
Even a Quonset's going to cost you more than that.
Exactly. There's so many reasons. But what the contractors share with us is if the process was not so much simpler, but easier, then it might help them be able to reduce some of the costs. And if they could reduce costs, they'll pass it on to the consumer. Anytime the cost goes up, and here's the thing, GRT went up, now they're talking about increasing labor, minimum wage, fees for, if you're a contractor and you have a worker, your cost went up by almost 1,000%, okay?
Yeah,
it went up.
Fully understand that.
This gets passed on to the end product buyer.
Because if you don't pass it on, you're running at a loss.
And this is what the government fails to understand. It gets passed on. Our home buyers are paying for it on that end.
Yeah, the few that are home buyers. a lot of them are renting now because they can't get
Right,
into that
because
market.
they can't afford
Yeah,
it.
fully understand that processes have a cost associated with them. And this is an area where the government of Guam has control over. And so if they can control it and reduce it, they can those savings can be passed on to the consumers. Fully understand that process. Fully understand.
So in your committee, where are you guys starting first? I mean, what's for building permits specifically? Because that's what we're most interested in.
Well, the committee broke into two subcommittees, one on business licenses, one on building permits, so that we could do these things concurrently. And on both processes, the first thing we did was to go to the regulatory agency and said, what is your flow chart? Let me see your flow chart. Do you have it documented? And we have received some flow charts, and we've had some presentations by some of the different agencies on what their processes is, so we can understand that process, why they're doing it. Talking to them about the logistics of it. Also taking a look at the rules and regulations, making sure that they have a clear mandate or whether it's an interpretation of a mandate. We're fortunate that in this committee we've got a lawyer on board that can help us review some of the rules and regulations. So we've collected all of those, the rules and regulations, the Guam Code, all the different things that are considered mandates that are placed on these agencies. Because if there's a mandate placed on it, they don't have discretion. Okay?
Yeah,
and
that's
so,
right.
That's right.
and then we have to take a look at that mandate and say, wait a second, is that still a valid mandate?
That's
you know,
right.
and all of those things have to be taken into consideration. And this is why looking at best practices elsewhere can come back and question some of our mandates. If it's not necessary over there, why is it necessary over here?
Yeah.
And we fully have to understand that the regulatory agencies have a public interest to protect. We don't want to take that away. We don't want to fully deregulate it because
No,
the
not
entire
at all.
the entire island is going to look like Harmon Strip.
That's right.
Okay,
That's
you
not
don't want
the
that.
objective.
You don't
Yeah.
want that. Okay,
Yes.
so but we can develop a reasonable balance between both needs,
Yeah,
and I
it has
think
to
that's
be
possible.
reasonable.
One of the things that we've looked at and considering is the use of technology. The old
Yes.
systems are not are analog. Everything's paper. Those are costs that are involved. If we automate it, what can we do in that process? We've also taken a look at a community in Arizona where on the building review process, the engineers and the architects can self-certify. So it doesn't have to go through a second review. If it's already self-certified, you can hold that person responsible and don't pass it on. So those are costs that we're looking at in improving on.
Yeah, you mentioned about process, and one of the things that I've noticed in trying to get my building permit is, you know, you turn in the plans to all the agencies. There's 8 of them now that have to get a copy of the plans. But I thought in turning in the plans that each agency will review it and get back to me, like I give it to everybody and then you all
In
review
parallel.
it. Yes,
Yeah,
but
parallel.
that's not how they do
no.
it. I've actually come across agencies that looked at my plan and said, well, did Parks and Rec sign off? No, Parks and Rec hasn't signed. Well, we're not going to review it until Parks and Rec signs off because they're one of the hardest agencies to clear. And I'm like, but why? It just means I have to, it's a longer timeline if you don't all concurrently review. And that's exactly what I'm getting is, oh no, did so-and-so sign off? Okay, no, come back when that agency signs off.
If they did it
Yeah.
concurrently,
Yeah, the
it
thing-
would save time
Yes.
and money.
Would make
but-
sense.
but-
It's
but-
reasonable.
But going back and say, okay, why are you doing it consecutively, okay, in a series? Understanding that logic and say, okay, that logic may not be valid if we do this,
Yeah.
and find some different a tweaking of the process.
A tweak,
Yeah,
yes.
and I've been there.
Definitely need a tweak.
I sat on the development review committee for a long time as a reviewer, and a lot of the position papers done in the early '90s were written by me. So I've been there, I've done that, I understand that, and now going back and taking a look at that, I say, wait a second, if I had done it better with this insight, how would I have done it better? Okay,
Yes.
and knowing that the people that I worked with on those development review committees also have good ideas. Let's capture those ideas. And you can't capture that until you ask that question. If you were to be in charge of this process, how would you do it differently? We don't ask that question enough.
Yeah, and I think when you ask that question, if you're serving the community, is it helping them?
Yeah.
Because we're a government entity, should be there for what purpose? It's to help, and it's to help our community.
Again, they've got to understand that. If they don't understand that, they're going to continue to do what they're comfortable with, and that is getting through the day from 8 to 5. And you see that. There are some people there that possibly shouldn't be there because of the fact that they're not concerned who the public is.
So what I think we're probably going to do through the course of your process is interview you again in the future. We're running out of time right now, but one of the things we want to do when you talk about mandatory and legislative issues affecting these regulations, we're also going to interview the Speaker of the House to ask what is the process, should there be a change required in the regulatory process.
And part of that is the question is, if we change this regulatory process, what are the consequences?
Yes.
And make sure
Yes,
that
of
if there are
course.
some adverse consequences that we haven't looked at, be aware of that.
Yeah.
Okay? Because change is not necessarily for the better. You don't want to change something and find out it gets worse.
Yes, exactly.
Well, this is
thank you
ongoing,
so
yeah.
much. We really appreciate you being with us.
I'm
We're so
excited about this. I'm excited about this. And it's ability to take prior insights, prior experiences, and go back and say, okay, how can we do this differently and make it better for everybody? Because the message that the government of Guam is sending out to people right now is, we don't want you to build affordable housing. We don't want you to do business licenses. And like I mentioned earlier, you have three choices. You either go through their process and pay for the cost, you either do nothing, or you go underground.
Well, we're
Well, thank
definitely
you.
not doing nothing.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you so much.
And hopefully our community is checked in and seeing how we progress through the show.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Closed captioning is brought to you by IT&E. Explore your world.